To our newbies, welcome. To our old friends, welcome back. You know, I like to get right into it. Let me just say a quick, please hit that subscribe button. Commenting is what I really am interested in, though. I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions, please know that you are welcome to leave those in the chat below the video. And obviously, if you don't mind, if you find this valuable, giving us a like, that thumbs up. Well, today I want to talk to you about the burden of prayer. Now, let me clarify. Prayer is not a burden, but to pray is to carry a burden to God. And when we do that, it shifts that burden from us and allows God to move on behalf of that burden. I want to use the illustration of the Western Wall because in Isaiah 56:7, the temple of God is prophesied as being a house of prayer. And indeed, that's what Jesus is asking for when he shows up in Jerusalem in the temple area, that the Lord's house be restored and returned to a house of prayer. So the Western Wall in Jerusalem is what exists of that temple era when Jesus was walking the earth and ministering and showing up in the temple. And recently there were 1,000 Christian leaders. And when I say recently, I mean in December 2025, so just a little over a year and a half ago, 1,000 Christian leaders who gathered there at the Western Wall to pray, which is a rich tradition for Jews to this very day to go and there offer their prayers at the wall. And it is obviously also a major tourist attraction, which is fine. You know, if I ever get the opportunity, which I hope that I do, I definitely want to go and visit the Western Wall. But I am advocating that it be more than a tourist attraction. And so let me take the image of the temple that stood during Jesus' day and the wall that remains today and apply it this way, that the temple then today is you and I. We are the temple, the living embodiment of the living God, right? So we then should be the house of prayer, if that makes sense, okay? And there's a tradition there where the Jews leave prayer notes, and tourists alike, leave tour notes in the cracks and crevices of the Western Wall. In other words, they've written down their prayer request and on these little slips of paper, and they slide them right there, and then they leave them there, kind of as symbolic or representative of those things that they are carrying as burdens. And on this day in December of 2025, these 1,000 Christian leaders came to the wall bearing the names of victims of the October 7th, 2023 Nova Music Festival massacre. And so they were coming there in solidarity with the Jewish people, praying an intercession on behalf of those families and their loss and the memories of those precious souls and individuals, and asking for God's intercession there in the land. And so that's just a beautiful portrait and picture of what I'm talking about when I'm advocating for carrying a burden. Not a burden to pray, but carrying a burden which shifts the burden off of us and allows God to move on our behalf. So again, let me clarify. Prayer is carrying someone else's burden as if it were our own. So that's what I'm adding to that thought, as if it was our own. And Jesus, after all, invites us with these words to cast our cares on him. And I'm going to interpret that as burden, right? Cast our burdens on him, if you allow me to translate it that way. Cast our burdens on him. And so that is the invitation of Jesus even for this shift, this transfer to occur. I read this by a guy named Kelton Hughes recently online, who said, "Hell is terrified of our prayers." Let me quote him again. "Hell is terrified of our prayers, not our posts, not our opinions, not our complaints, but our prayers. And our prayers will represent those burdens. And burdens are those things which move us deep down within. Those things that we're yearning and longing for transformation. Those things that we're yearning and longing for answers to. Those things that we're yearning and longing for on behalf of others to come to pass. And then a teacher named James Tan, I have heard say before that sweat and oil both glisten, but they are not the same. And let me unpack that for you. Sweat and oil both glisten, but they're not the same. So I see sweat, if I can take these words of James Tan and use them this way, as the things that we try to do to bring about change in a situation or to a circumstance. That's the sweat, right? That's the sweat equity, if you will. The things that we're doing on our own behalf, things that we know to do, that we're trying, those things that we're proverbially just throwing against the wall to see if they stick, to bring about some kind of different course. However, if I can help us this way with the image of oil, oil becomes the prayer. And our prayers, when offered to God, right, on behalf of our burdens, then become the ways in which God can now begin to move and bring about those things that we cannot ourselves. After all, it's not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of God, thus saith the Lord, do things actually come about of any kind of lasting quality. So sweat and oil both glisten, but only one is able to bring about real change. And so that oil is our prayers, our intercessory prayers, particularly when we not only carry our own burdens, but the burdens of others. And then let me offer you this one final quote that I also read recently from Rick Joyner, where he said, prayer can have more impact than anything we can do in the natural. Prayer has more impact than anything we can do in the natural. So pairing that with the previous thought, we really see that prayer begins to take shape when we take our circumstances and situations and we offer them to God in a spiritual way, recognizing that we are incapable of doing things on our own, which is, in keeping with what Jesus said, apart from him and his Spirit, we can do nothing that brings about any kind of eternal impact. So prayer then becomes just a huge blessing that you and I have been given as a gift, that you and I are invited to participate in, that you and I should become then what I call the church on two legs. The church on two legs is the house of prayer. So we ourselves are becoming houses of prayer, which indeed is what I think Jesus is hoping that we will be, and the prophet was advocating that we would become the house of prayer. And so the burden of prayer, my friends, it's not a burden to pray, but it's where we carry those burdens to God so that he can do something mighty. God bless you.